What would you do if a simple task meant to celebrate your independence turned into a battle for your dignity? How would you feel if, despite careful preparation, your efforts were dismissed, not because of mistakes, but because of who you are? Emily Dawson, a young woman with Down syndrome, walked into the bank determined to open her first savings account, a personal milestone that symbolized her growing independence. Instead, she was met with condescension, dismissed as incapable, and pushed aside until an unexpected ally, Keanu Reeves, witnessed her struggle. In a world too quick to judge, how far must someone go to prove their worth? And what happens when a simple act of kindness turns a moment of injustice into a powerful stand for respect? Before we continue this story, let us know where you are watching from. If you like stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. Emily Dawson woke up to a gentle beam of sunshine illuminating her tidy studio apartment. The space, though modest, was brimming with personal touches that reflected her vibrant spirit. Colorful sticky notes dotted the fridge, each with a short reminder or motivational phrase. Family photographs adorned the walls, capturing shared laughter and holiday celebrations. This morning, however, was special. She was about to open her very first savings account. For Emily, this wasn't just another task. It was a personal milestone, proof that she was stepping further into her independence, no matter what society assumed about her capabilities. She had Down syndrome, and while the world often underestimated her, she believed in her own determination. She double-checked her neatly organized folder of documents and recited the instructions from a notebook where she had painstakingly listed every step. "Today's the day," she told her reflection in the small mirror near the front door. "You've got this, Emily Dawson." Upon arriving at the bank, she felt a quick pang of nervousness. The lobby was bustling with harried customers. Lines snaked around cordoned-off areas, and the hum of complaints drifted through the air. Despite the chaos, Emily clutched her papers against her chest, reminding herself of the weeks she'd spent preparing. She joined the queue, mentally rehearsing how to request opening a savings account. Eventually, her turn came. Behind the counter stood a woman named Brittany Stanton, who looked every bit as stressed as the queue suggested. Her shoulders slouched, and her mouth was set in a thin line. "Yes?" Brittany said brusquely, barely lifting her gaze from the computer screen. "What do you need?" Emily managed a hopeful smile. I'd like to open a savings account, please," she said, sliding her folder forward. Brittany's expression barely changed. She flipped through the pages, sighing in apparent impatience. "You filled out some of this wrong." She jabbed a finger at a spot on one page, then another. "And the rest doesn't look any better. Honestly, you should come back with a guardian or someone who can handle this for you." Emily's cheeks reddened at the dismissive tone. She checked those forms multiple times. "But I'm sure it's right," she began, her words trembling with uncertainty. "I followed all the instructions." Brittany cut her off. "Look, honey, you're just wasting my time if you can't fill these out properly. Why don't you sit over there," she pointed to a row of chairs, "and maybe wait for someone else who can help you." Fumbling with her papers, Emily stepped aside, her heart pounding. She felt eyes on her, curious stares from other customers who weren't quite sure what was happening. She couldn't decide which emotion was stronger, embarrassment or frustration. Trying to steady her breathing, she sank into one of the chairs and thumbed through the documents again. She found no glaring errors. She had filled out her personal information clearly, attached her ID, and signed where indicated. It was more thorough than many people might manage. Yet her confidence was slipping away under Brittany's condescending approach. Minutes later, the bank manager, Greg Morgan, approached with a forced smile. His tie was tight around his neck, and his brow creased with what seemed like practiced concern. "Miss Dawson, I understand you're having trouble with your paperwork. Let's have a quick chat." Emily followed him to a small desk in a quieter corner. Relieved to be momentarily away from the glaring eyes and impatient sighs that filled the lobby, she explained again that she'd saved money from her job at a local cafe and now wanted to deposit it into a proper savings account. She explained how carefully she'd prepared her documents, throughout her explanation. Greg's smile never quite reached his eyes. Sure, he said, flipping through her pages. But are you certain you're ready to manage an account alone? Sometimes these processes can be complicated. Emily's stomach twisted. I'm capable. I've been working for months to save this money. I know what I'm doing. Greg leaned back, fingers laced over his stomach. I'm not implying you're incompetent, Miss Dawson. However, the bank often requests a guardian's signature for certain clients, particularly if we sense complications. That's just to make sure you're fully protected. We wouldn't want any mistakes. Her face went hot, a mix of anger and humiliation. I have all the required paperwork. I read everything carefully before coming here, she insisted. While Greg responded with a placating nod, Emily could overhear murmurs from the nearby line of customers. Their voices ranged from whispered sympathy to outright scorn. Some muttered that she was holding everyone up. Others uttered offensive remarks about how people with special needs shouldn't handle complex tasks. Each comment felt like a slap, echoing louder than Greg's words. Trying to compose herself, she whispered, I'm my own guardian. I don't need another signature. Why don't you just come back another day? Greg said with a shrug, ignoring her protests. Bring someone who can confirm this arrangement for you. Then we can talk about opening an account. Emily's eyes filled with tears, though she blinked them back fiercely. She refused to let them see her cry. Pressing the folder to her chest, she headed toward the bank's exit, shoulders tight with resentment and sorrow. What she didn't notice was that she wasn't the only one disturbed by what was happening. In the far corner of the waiting area, a quietly seated man had been following every detail of the humiliating exchange. Sporting a simple cap and sunglasses, he was easy to overlook in the chaos. But beneath that modest disguise was Keanu Reeves, an occasional visitor to the city who had come to the bank for his own errands. And from the way his features had hardened during Emily's ordeal, it was clear he wouldn't be leaving without intervening. Feeling utterly deflated, Emily stopped halfway to the exit. A row of plastic chairs lined the wall near the door, and she found herself dropping onto one, her paperwork resting in her lap. She stared at the forms and IDs she had meticulously prepared. She thought everything was correct. She was sure of it. In fact, yet the dismissive, patronizing attitudes of Brittany and Greg had shaken her. She inhaled deeply, trying to quell the tears threatening to spill over. I did everything right, she muttered, glancing at a scribbled page of instructions she'd brought as a backup. Each step was checked off. She'd read and reread the bank's website guidelines. She'd even asked a friend to proofread it all. And yet, a few feet away, a couple of customers whispered, occasionally shooting sympathetic or curious looks her way. Emily overheard scraps of conversation. She shouldn't be alone, someone said. Another person muttered, this is taking forever. Why doesn't she get help? Their ignorance was a razor blade to her pride. She wanted to stand up and shout that she didn't need a babysitter. But the words stuck in her throat, trapped by a mounting frustration that left her feeling voiceless. Across the lobby, hidden behind a magazine stand, Keanu Reeves observed the unfolding drama. His heart went out to Emily, the way she hunched over her papers, trembling with effort to maintain composure. He saw the staff's dismissive approach, witnessed the manager's smarmy smile, and heard enough from the other customers to sense this wasn't a mere bureaucratic slip-up. It was a reflection of deeper biases, ones he had encountered before, albeit in different contexts. Keanu quietly rose from his seat, stepping out from behind the stand. He watched as Emily mustered the courage to approach Greg one last time. She hadn't yet noticed him, but he was ready to step in the moment he felt the situation demanded it. The bank employees, oblivious to his celebrity identity under his casual cap, paid him little attention as he wove through the throng of customers. I want to open my account today, Emily insisted, standing by Greg's desk again. Her knuckles whitened on the folder. I've done everything required. Please, can't you just go through the process with me like you would with anyone else? Greg sighed, glancing sideways at Brittany. Miss Dawson, he began, with exaggerated patience. We've explained there are procedures to follow when there's a question of legal guardianship. It's not personal. It's just bank policy. Emily's eyes flashed. I am my own guardian, she repeated. And the forms say I have the right to sign. There's no requirement for someone else to co-sign. I'm not a child. She might as well have been invisible to Greg. Turning away from her, he spoke quietly to Brittany. Is there any manager's override we can do to push her aside for the day? This is taking too long. Brittany shrugged. I try to send her home, but she keeps insisting. Maybe just tell her the system is down or something. That was the last straw for Keanu. The quiet murmur of collusion between the two was more than he could stomach. Before Emily could respond, Keanu cut across the floor and addressed them in a voice calm, yet resolute. Is that what you do here? Make excuses to avoid dealing with customers who need extra assistance? Brittany whirled around, a startled scowl on her face. She sized up the man who had spoken. Unassuming clothes, a simple cap, sunglasses perched on his head. He didn't look like an official or a threat, but there was authority in his tone she couldn't dismiss. Sir, this is a private conversation. If you have banking business, please wait your turn, she said curtly, attempting to sound authoritative. Without breaking eye contact, Keanu removed his sunglasses. A wave of quiet recognition spread among nearby customers. Several people gasped or murmured under their breath. That's Keanu Reeves, isn't it? But Brittany, stuck in her own bubble of frustration, hadn't registered the name or face yet. Sir, you can't just barge in. Keanu didn't raise his voice. I'm not barging in. I'm asking why you're trying to send this woman away when her paperwork is in order. I saw how you treated her from the moment she stepped up to the counter. He turned slightly to include Greg in his gaze. It's not policy, it's prejudice. Emily stared at him, eyes wide, heart hammering. She recognized him now. Of course, everyone did, but she was stunned to see him standing by her side. Greg swallowed hard, shifting on his feet. Mr. R, sir, we're simply following the rules to verify that Miss Dawson is able to open an account on her own. It's for her own protection. Protection from what? Keanu asked, arching an eyebrow. He gestured at the forms in Emily's hands. I've seen her documents. They're organized. She's clearly aware of the steps. If you truly believed she needed guidance, you'd offer assistance instead of shutting her down. Brittany's face twisted with indignation, but she sensed the shift in the bank's atmosphere. Customers were gathering closer, emboldened by Keanu's words. Some nodded vigorously, recalling times they'd seen staff act similarly dismissive. Emily herself, still trembling, found a surge of courage spark within her at the sight of this unexpected ally. I can't just wave a magic wand, Brittany retorted, voice unsteady. We need to verify legal guardianship for certain clients. That's standard. If she doesn't meet the criteria, we can't open an account. End of story. Keanu exhaled slowly, controlling his rising frustration. It's not the end of the story. We all heard you discussing ways to lie about the system being down just so you could get rid of her. That's not standard protocol. That's humiliating a paying customer who has every right to be here. By now, the bank's security guard hovered uncertainly at the edge of the gathering. But he hadn't been instructed to remove anyone, especially not a celebrity of Keanu's stature. Greg cleared his throat, adjusting his tie with a nervous tug. Let's, maybe handle this discreetly. It doesn't have to be a public spectacle. Keanu's eyes flashed. The humiliation was public. Why should the resolution be hidden? Emily has been ridiculed in front of everyone here. She deserves an apology and the same treatment anyone else would get if they walked in with correct paperwork. A hush spread. Emily swallowed hard, flicking her gaze around. For the first time all day, she felt seen. The sting of earlier insults lingered, but the oppressive feeling that she was alone began to ebb. Her lips trembled, but a spark of determination flickered in her eyes. Greg forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. We can recheck her documents. If everything's truly in order, I'll personally oversee the account opening process. Keanu nodded, stepping aside slightly. That's a start, but let's make sure we address the disrespect as well. This is about more than papers. Brittany glared daggers at him, but kept quiet, perhaps realizing that continuing to argue would only make matters worse. As she reluctantly gestured for Emily to return to the counter, the tension in the lobby remained thick. The next few moments would determine whether the bank would correct its wrongs or keep up its facade. And from the look on Keanu's face, he was determined not to let them bury the issue under a veneer of false courtesy. A taut silence settled over the bank lobby as Brittany stood at her computer, rechecking Emily's paperwork. Her fingers moved stiffly over the keyboard. Greg hovered nearby, occasionally tapping his foot or clearing his throat, while Keanu Reeves and Emily stood side by side, equally intent on the process. A small crowd of customers looked on, their earlier frustration morphing into curiosity, and in some cases, open support for Emily. At first, Brittany's posture was rigid, as though she fully expected to find some overlooked error. But with each second that passed, her frown deepened. At last, she turned to Greg, speaking in a forced hush that was still audible to those around. "The forms are correct. Everything's filled out as required." Greg's mouth tightened. He cast a sidelong glance at Keanu, then turned to Emily. "Miss Dawson, it seems your documents are indeed in order. I'm not sure if there was some confusion earlier, but you do qualify to open a savings account with us." A bitter laugh threatened to spill from Emily's lips, but she contained it, opting instead for a measured nod. "I've been trying to say that all along. Thank you for finally acknowledging it." Keanu placed a gentle hand on Emily's shoulder, a supportive gesture that lent her further confidence. The hush in the lobby persisted, broken only by occasional shuffling as people strained to listen. It was clear that no one, staff or customer, wanted to miss a moment of this confrontation. Greg cleared his throat again. "Let's proceed, then. Brittany, I'd like you to finalize Miss Dawson's account opening." Though she remained visibly uncomfortable, Brittany managed to swallow her pride. "Yes, sir. Right away." She gestured toward Emily. "Could you confirm your details, please?" Emily recited her information once more: full name, address, date of birth, social security number. The same details she'd provided before, now accepted without protest. She handed over her ID and watched anxiously as Brittany typed, eyes flickering across the screen. In the meantime, Greg tried to salvage the bank's reputation. He forced a grin in Keanu's direction. "Mr. Reeves, we appreciate you bringing this to our attention. Rest assured, we value all our customers, including those with special needs." "Words are easy," Keanu replied, voice calm but pointed. "The question is whether your actions will change." Emily wasn't the first person to face such treatment here. Just ask some of your other customers. If you really want to show you value everyone, prove it. Greg's smile flickered. "Of course. We'll be reviewing our training and internal procedures to ensure better service for all." His statement had the ring of a carefully rehearsed corporate apology. Keanu didn't push back further, allowing him a moment of grace. Turning to Emily, he lowered his voice so only she could hear. "You all right?" She nodded, her eyes misty. Better now that someone finally listened. Just then, a small beep sounded at Brittany's terminal. She printed out a confirmation slip and handed it to Emily. "Your account is officially open," she said, her voice lacking its earlier harshness. "You can deposit funds now or return any time to manage your money. We apologize for the delay." Emily's hands trembled slightly as she took the slip of paper. It symbolized far more than a bank transaction. It was a tangible victory, her independence validated after weeks of preparation. She swallowed around the emotion tightening her throat. "Thank you," she said quietly. At that moment, a ripple of applause broke out among a few onlooking customers. One older gentleman who had witnessed everything stepped forward, nodding approvingly. "Good for you, young lady. Glad you finally got the respect you deserve." A younger woman in yoga pants snapped a quick photo with her phone, presumably capturing the moment Emily stood triumphant at the counter, Keanu by her side. Though Emily usually disliked being the center of attention, this time she felt a sense of pride. Brittany stiffly stepped back from the counter, relief warring with embarrassment on her face. Greg, seeing the crowd's reaction, attempted a conciliatory tone. "Miss Dawson, I hope we can move forward on good terms. We really do want to serve you well." Emily glanced at him, a quiet fortitude in her expression. "I appreciate that. Just remember, next time, to treat people from the start as if they belong, because they do." Keanu nodded in agreement. "Exactly. If someone needs extra guidance, provide it with respect, not contempt. If they're fully prepared, let them proceed without roadblocks. It's not difficult to show common courtesy." Greg opened his mouth, likely to deliver another corporate-sounding promise. But the general atmosphere had shifted. The employees, Brittany included, seemed less defensive, possibly because they'd recognized that an apology alone wouldn't fully erase the day's impressions. Emily turned to Keanu, her voice shaky with emotion. "Thank you for helping me. Without you, I don't think they would have listened." He offered a soft smile, dipping his head slightly. "I'm glad I could do something. But don't discount your own courage, Emily. You didn't back down, remember that." Behind them, a line had formed again at the counters. Real-life commerce waits for no crisis, and soon the bank would need to function as usual. But the sense of resolution was tangible. With an unspoken understanding, Keanu gestured toward a quieter corner where they could step aside. Emily followed, the confirmation slip still clutched in her hand like a precious token. They found a small seating area away from the bustle. Keanu spoke in a low tone, so only she could hear. "How are you feeling now?" She took a moment, pressing the slip to her heart. "Relieved and proud. This account, it's more than just a place to keep money. It's a statement that I'm capable, that I can handle my life like anyone else." Keanu nodded. "That's exactly what it is. Don't let anyone question that again." A passing bank teller, presumably less jaded than Brittany, offered them both a shy smile, as though silently cheering Emily on. The difference in that gesture reaffirmed that not everyone here agreed with the earlier treatment. Emily exhaled, tension melting from her shoulders. "I really can't thank you enough. I thought I'd have to leave here feeling like a failure, or come back with someone to validate me. But I don't need anyone else to confirm my abilities." "Exactly," Keanu said softly. "Never let someone else define your worth." A final wave of anxious energy seemed to pass between them, replaced by an air of calm triumph. In the background, Greg was politely guiding staff members back to their tasks, while Brittany had retreated to another station, meticulously avoiding Keanu's gaze. Though the immediate crisis was resolved, Emily and Keanu both sensed that the conversation about how institutions treat people with disabilities was far from over. This small episode was a microcosm of a broader issue, one that would require more than one day's confrontation to solve. Yet for now, a single, significant victory had been achieved. Emily Dawson, standing tall, with her brand-new bank account in hand. After the tension-laden scene near the counter, the bank manager Greg arranged an impromptu meeting in a small conference area at the side of the main lobby. He invited Emily, Keanu, and a handful of staff members who had witnessed the incident, including Brittany. Despite her obvious discomfort, Brittany complied. A few curious customers lingered nearby, unwilling to leave after such a dramatic turn of events. It wasn't standard procedure for a bank to host a spontaneous assembly in front of customers, but Greg sensed the necessity. He needed to salvage both the bank's reputation and the morale of his staff, all while addressing the legitimate concerns Keanu had raised. Emily walked into the conference space with her chin lifted, feeling more confident now than she had an hour earlier. Keanu stayed close, though he allowed her to step forward and speak for herself. This was, after all, her fight first and foremost. Greg started with a practiced smile. "I want to apologize once more for any inconvenience. Our goal as an institution is to serve everyone effectively. Today's incident doesn't reflect our core values, and we'd like to clarify a few things." He gestured for Brittany to stand next to him. She complied reluctantly, arms crossed over her chest. Her gaze flicked from Emily to Keanu. "Yes," Brittany began, forcing a professional tone. "I apologize if I came off as dismissive. Sometimes we're under a lot of pressure and we don't handle more involved requests as we should." The mention of more involved requests rubbed Emily the wrong way, yet she decided not to dwell on the wording. Instead, she cleared her throat and addressed them both. The only involvement you needed was to do your job and treat me like a capable person. I'm not a special case. I'm a customer. I had the correct paperwork, and I shouldn't have needed an advocate to force you to process it. A faint murmur of approval rose from some employees and bystanders who had gathered. Keanu nodded, adding, "Emily is right. The question is what steps you're willing to take so that no one else goes through this." Greg braced himself, inhaling deeply. "We're implementing immediate changes. Staff training, for starters. Every employee will learn how to handle accounts and queries with sensitivity, especially for those with developmental or intellectual disabilities. We'll address prejudices that might be creeping into our daily routines." Though the words sounded like the typical corporate promise, there was a sincere edge in Greg's voice, likely born of the public scrutiny now directed at him. Keanu studied his face. Words alone won't fix the rude attitudes, but it's a start, he conceded. Brittany's expression softened somewhat, her shoulders lowering. "I know I was rude," she admitted. I assumed things about you, Miss Dawson, and that was unfair." She swallowed, then met Emily's eyes. "I am sorry." Emily blinked, briefly taken aback by the direct apology. "Thank you. It means a lot to me that you're saying it in front of everyone. But an apology can't be the end of this. I want to know that the next person who comes in, someone who might not have a Keanu Reeves to stand up for them, will be treated with basic respect." Brittany's eyes dropped. "You're right. I'll do better." A wave of relief seemed to ripple through the small group. Keanu gave Emily a small nod, acknowledging her strength in voicing that crucial point. Greg cleared his throat, addressing the staff around him. "As of now, if a client arrives with any special needs, or even if they just seem to need more guidance, we offer them a seat, walk them through the forms carefully, and ensure their rights are respected. No more turning them away or finding excuses to push them aside." A round of quiet applause erupted from employees and customers alike. It was an unusual sight. A bank manager effectively changing policy on the spot in the presence of his staff and a few watchful patrons. Yet no one doubted the sincerity of the moment. Keanu stepped forward, scanning the small circle. "And let this be a reminder to all of us that every person who walks in your door is valuable. If they're confused, you guide them. If they have special needs, you accommodate them. That's not a courtesy. It's their right as a customer." An employee in the back, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "I agree. I've seen how older customers or folks with language barriers are sometimes brushed off. Maybe we can also create a dedicated help desk or have an employee specialized in assisting them. It could speed up processes for everyone and avoid these fiascos." Greg latched onto the idea. "That's an excellent suggestion. Let's look into establishing a specialized service desk. And we'll absolutely provide staff training to ensure we're consistent." As the meeting seemed to wind down, Emily found her voice again. "I'm grateful for this," she began, her eyes shifting from Greg to Brittany, then to Keanu. "But let's remember, none of this would have happened without me speaking up and without Keanu Reeves stepping in. We shouldn't need a famous person to intervene to get justice. People deserve respect, whether they're recognized celebrities or not." Her words resonated deeply, stirring an uneasy self-awareness in Brittany, Greg, and even the employees who had only observed. Keanu nodded. "Exactly. This incident only got the attention it did because people recognized me. But Emily had done everything right on her own. She's the real hero for not giving up." A hush fell, thick with reflection. For the first time all day, Emily felt like an equal in the room, her voice carrying weight. She no longer needed to cling to her folder of documents as if it were a security blanket. Her presence and determination spoke loudly enough. Greg managed a small, genuine smile at Emily. "We'll be better, I promise. And you're always welcome here, Miss Dawson." Emily nodded, her posture straight and confident. "Thank you. I'm going to hold you to that." With the informal meeting concluded, the staff and remaining customers dispersed. Some lingered to shake Emily's hand or thank Keanu for standing up to injustice. The bank was returning to its usual buzz of transactions, forms, and money matters. But a quiet victory had been woven into its routine, a shift in perspective that wouldn't soon be forgotten. The next day, a subtle ripple had already begun to spread beyond the bank's walls. Social media posts shared by onlookers showcased snapshots of Emily's courageous stand and Keanu Reeves' unexpected intervention. The photos were accompanied by captions like, "Famous actor defends woman with Down syndrome at local bank," and "One brave customer calls out discrimination, gets celebrity support." Emily Dawson's phone buzzed incessantly that morning. Messages poured in from acquaintances, co-workers at the cafe where she worked, and even a few strangers who had stumbled across the story online. Some lauded her resilience, while others simply wrote words of encouragement, amazed that she had persevered in a situation that would leave many people flustered or defeated. Meanwhile, Keanu Reeves woke to find his public relations manager forwarding numerous press inquiries about the incident. He sighed lightly, remembering how his intention wasn't to create a media spectacle. He'd merely stepped up because it was the right thing to do. Still, he was relieved that Emily's story was gaining traction. Perhaps that visibility would spur further change in how businesses treated customers with special needs. Back at the bank, Greg Morgan wasted no time. True to his word, he convened another staff meeting, this time behind closed doors, but with a clear agenda: reevaluating policies and attitudes. Brittany Stanton found herself in the spotlight, not for punishment per se, but as a central example of how unconscious bias can slip into everyday tasks. She admitted that under pressure, she had tried to save time by brushing Emily off, something she now realized was both ethically wrong and harmful to the bank's reputation. As for Emily, she decided to carry on with her routine. She rose early, put on the apron for her cafe job, and served coffee to the usual morning rush. Her co-workers buzzed with excitement over the recent events, and her boss insisted on giving her a round of applause before the shift began. Blushing furiously, Emily thanked them and insisted she was the same person she'd been the day before. Just with a new savings account, she joked. Yet she knew her sense of self had grown. The confrontation and victory at the bank had fueled a quiet confidence in her. No longer would she wait passively when someone questioned her abilities. She'd proven to herself that she could stand up for her rights, and that sometimes the world needed a reminder of her worth. Around midday, as she took her break, her phone lit up with an unexpected caller, Greg Morgan. She hesitated a moment before answering. "Miss Dawson," he said, sounding more cordial than ever, "I want to let you know we're extending an invitation for you to join us in a small workshop we're hosting at the bank. We'd like you to share your perspective with our staff, if you're comfortable with that, of course. It's part of our initiative to ensure what happened never repeats." Emily's heart fluttered at the idea. She certainly hadn't expected to be singled out in this way. "A workshop? You mean I talk in front of employees and maybe some managers?" Greg cleared his throat. "Yes, exactly. You have a unique perspective. Hearing from you directly might help them understand how harmful certain assumptions can be." There was a time when Emily might have been paralyzed by the thought of public speaking, especially in a setting where she'd once been humiliated. But after the events of the previous day, fear no longer dictated her decisions. "I'll think about it," she replied quietly. "Thank you for asking." Later that evening, Keanu Reeves also reached out, texting to check in on her. They'd exchanged contact information at the bank, and though she was initially starstruck, she soon realized he meant it sincerely when he said he cared about her well-being. In his message, he wrote, "How are you holding up, Emily? Saw the news coverage. Glad people are talking about it. Let me know if you need anything." She smiled at the screen, appreciating his kindness. "I'm good." She typed back, "It's been a wild day, but I'm happy. Thank you again for everything." His reply came swiftly, "Proud of you. Stand. You did the hard part, remember that." She locked her phone and gazed out the window of her small apartment, letting a sense of gratitude wash over her. Life wasn't always fair, she knew that too well. But if nothing else, The events at the bank had given her renewed faith in her own ability to speak up and in the potential for others to recognize their wrongs and change. In the weeks that followed, Emily accepted Greg's invitation. Standing before a group of bank employees, she recounted her experience, explaining how each dismissive word, each skeptical look, had cut her deeper than any official policy ever could. She spoke with honesty and a gentle confidence that silenced the entire room. While not all transformations happen overnight, that workshop planted seeds of empathy in employees who might have once written off customers like Emily. Meanwhile, the rumor mill churned about Keanu Reeves' involvement. Some called it just another PR stunt, but many realized that he hadn't done anything to court attention. He'd simply stepped up for a stranger. For Emily, that was the real takeaway. Genuine kindness wasn't a spectacle. It was an act of shared humanity that reminded people of what dignity truly meant. Emily Dawson's experience at the bank served as a powerful testament that simple errands can sometimes transform into battles for self-worth. She had prepared meticulously, ready to open her first savings account, a rite of passage that proved harder than it should have been, not because her paperwork was flawed, but because biased attitudes made her climb a needless mountain of doubt. In that crucible of tension and disbelief, the unexpected support of Keanu Reeves underscored a fundamental truth. Anyone, regardless of fame or status, can choose to speak up against injustice. His intervention was important, but equally critical was Emily's own courage. Before anyone recognized Keanu, she had already insisted on her right to be treated with dignity. His voice may have amplified her cause, but the heart of the confrontation, her rightful stand, was entirely her own. The public stand taken by Emily and Keanu laid bare a broader social issue. Far too often, businesses and institutions hide behind policy or protocol as a cloak for discrimination. In the aftermath, Greg and Brittany faced the realization that subtle biases can create palpable harm, and they took steps to correct course. Their bank's promise to implement more inclusive training might seem small, but every shift in attitude counts. Emily, for her part, emerged from the ordeal not just with a newly opened savings account, but with a deeper faith in her own resilience. She hadn't allowed the ignorance of others to define her worth. In forging forward, she proved that genuine progress happens when people claim their space and demand fairness. As she often reminded herself in the days that followed, "I did it, and I can do it again." No matter how society labels us, or how others underestimate us, we each hold the power to shape our own destiny, and sometimes to spark change in the very systems meant to serve us.